It's a real pleasure to be here today. I started my career in social care, working first of all as a bus escort, bringing older people from the area that I lived in into the day service that was provided for them. And I then reached the dizzy heights of being a care officer. Although I do remember one vivid occasion when a lady called Nellie McMeekin said to me, "Care officer? You're more like a bloody prison officer." So, yeah, I didn't have an illustrious career in aged care, but I did learn to be very good at playing bingo. I can handle 40 tickets at once. You know, so once I realised that the numbers were in sequence, it was a whiz after that. But I'm thinking, did your heart not just sink when you saw the title of my talk, Person-Centred Planning, a New Approach to Assessment? Oh, not another new approach. Yeah? I know in the sector that I'm most familiar with, the disability sector, we are awash with new approaches. And I'm a bit over it, actually, because I don't think that we've done any of the old approaches particularly well. We move on to the next new idea as soon as it gets a bit bumpy. As soon as we get to the point at which we're actually testing our theories out and trying to make something good happen, the first time we stumble, we say, "This is rubbish. What's the next idea?" And so I hesitate in this group to bring you a new approach to assessment. So what I want to talk to you about is assessment, and I want to talk to you more thoroughly, I suppose, about what it means to be person-centred, and to let you make some, or have your own thoughts about whether or not this is likely to be a useful way for you to proceed with your work. I do think it would be, of course I would, but I understand that sort of fatigue of new ideas. You'll be familiar with these modes of assessment. They seem to still be in the textbooks, even although Jerry Smale was thinking and writing about them maybe 20, possibly even 30 years ago. The questioning, and I thought this was a very interesting, you talked about the use of language, Tracy. I thought this was a very interesting way of describing this. When I learned about these models of assessment about 100 years ago, it was described initially as the expert model of assessment, but it's now become, in many of the textbooks, the questioning model, which is, I think, a way of us trying to pretend that we're not experts when we're in that mode of asking people, about what's going on for them. I think it's fine to be an expert. If I want to have my appendix removed, I would really like an expert to do that. If I want to have my hair cut, can I have some expertise around about that? So I think let's not be shy about expertise. If I want a good diagnosis, bring on the expert. What I do worry about with the expert model is that many people stay in expert mode even when they don't have much expertise. They've read a book about something. But there it is, the questioning or the expert model of assessment exists. And it's right, you want to find out what's going on. You want to see what you can do to help, where you can plug some gaps, where, you need some expertise. If you want to make some referrals around medication or treatment or whatever, expertise is required. The second model that I'm familiar with is this procedural model, which is really about assessing people in order to allocate resources. So what you need is someone who knows their way around about the system, who understands how the money works, understands where the money comes from, what you can and can't apply for. Back in the UK, the welfare rights officers, they were the great people for that, because not only would they tell you about the benefits that were there, they would give you a bit of a heads up that said, if you apply for this, you can also apply for that. The social security people were only able to tell you strictly the letter of the law. So a good procedural assessment, someone who can tell you what's what, where to get what you need, really, really valuable. But I don't think that either of these two modes of assessment are the places where we stay in terms of person-centred assessment. We're much more in what Jerry Smale described as the exchange model. And in the exchange model, what we're saying is, I might know something about how the system works, but you know about yourself and your life and your family, and you know the impact that this situation or condition has on you. So let's work on this together. Let's exchange our ideas and our information. Let's start from the position where neither of us is the expert, Neither of us has all of the power and control, and each of us will slide in and out of being in charge as the situation requires. It's a shared model. Absolutely person-centered. Sit down, tell me about yourself. Let's see what we can figure out together to help you live the kind of life that you want to live. What will it take for that to happen? So in that exchange model, that's where we sit. And one of the things that's important, I think, about the exchange model is this idea of this sort of sharing and the balance of power. In the expert model, it will feel like the expert's in charge. Well, the expert will be in charge. They'll say, here's what's going to happen next. This is what you'll do. You might have some options about whether or not you take the medicine or follow the prescription, but they're saying this is how it should be. In the procedural model, somebody's got some information, and information and knowledge are power. They can help you get access to something or not. So they stay in the power rests with them. In the exchange model, there's a balance of it. If you imagine those old balancing scales, where sometimes you as the worker will be the person who might need to give some direction and take some control and guide. But most of the time, the person is stepping into that spot themselves. Okay? So that's the territory that I think we're in when we're talking about person-centred working. I am old enough to remember what it was like when no one knew anything about person-centred planning. I could go to meetings and talk about person-centred work, person-centred planning, and no one would have a blind idea of what I was on about. Nowadays, I go to meetings and everybody knows about it, everyone does it, everyone's great at it, everyone's got the T-shirt. And in fact, everyone's thought there was another way to change it and make it even better. And I'm a bit over that, actually, because I'm back to my original point that I don't think that anyone, in fact, I don't know of any place where anyone has really figured out this whole business of person-centred working. And indeed, how could we? Because by very definition, person-centred working means that you're doing something different for everyone. You're looking at this person who's sitting in front of you and you're thinking about what it would take for them to live well. And that will change in lots of situations with lots of people. There will be different answers to that question. You can't standardise that way of working. You can't roll it out and apply it everywhere. You can't come up with one form that will answer all of the questions that you ever need to ask about anyone ever in their life. It can't be done. It is a process of learning. It is essentially about building a relationship with a person. And from that relationship, figuring out where you're going, where are we going next, what's going to be helpful in this situation. So I'm at the point at which I'm really tired of smiling and nodding when people tell me about how person-centred their organisation is. And then they tell me that what they do is they maintain, aged care homes that have 120 people living in them, and they have a dementia unit that has 25 people living in it. But oh yeah, we work in a person-centred way. I heard a great one last week, actually. We don't do congregate living. We have people living in a shared environment. How interesting. What magic we work with words, So I'm just sick of that. And I think it's really important that to try and just say, you have to be thinking about what you're doing when you're talking about being person-centred. Are all your ducks in a row? Or are you just using those words because they happen to be the jargon that we're talking about this time? It could be something another time. So we'll come back to this. Person-centred planning, here's a definition of it. It's a constellation of tools designed to help a person or a family make a purposeful, meaningful change in their life. That was the definition described by John O'Brien, Jack Pierpoint, and Marsha Forrest, who are three of the great designers and innovators around person-centred working in the field of disability. Okay? So it's a process of change. It's about helping to make something meaningful happen in someone's life. Their other intentions were to shift the axis of power in the relationship between the person and the system. The system held all of the power. The person had very little power. So how can we shift that so that we're back to this balance? Yeah. The other stated intention of person-centred working was to give a voice to people who had no voice, who had been overlooked by the system, were in the process of being ignored, shunted around, put in silos, having things done to them. I was very interested in your comment about communication, because I do, you just made me think, yeah, where are the speech and language therapists? Why are people with dementia not getting access to some of the communication devices that have proved to be so useful for people in the disability sector who don't use words to speak? Yeah. Giving people a voice is a really fundamental thing to do. So person-centred planning, person-centred working was all about that, shifting the balance of power so it rested more with the people and their families, and giving a voice to people who were voiceless. Now, I want to break it down a wee bit, because what's happened is person-centred planning has become a sort of catch-all term. Okay, I think there are three aspects that it's worth looking at. I think there's a whole notion about being person-centred in the first place. And this is about having attitudes and values that honour a person's unique individuality and perspective and are concerned with their full inclusion. Now, the bits about this that I think are really important are this notion about not just honouring a person, and well, actually, I think the notion of honouring is an old-fashioned word, but I think it's an important word. You know, I might not get why you like this done in this way, but I'm going to honour your choice in it. I'm going to honour the fact that you have 85 years on this earth, and I have 54. You know, you've seen more, you've done things. I'm going to be honourable and respectful around that. You know, I'm going to understand that you have a completely different experience of life than the one that I do. You've seen things, you've done things, you've been shaped by events, actually sometimes considerable historical events that have brought you to this place that you're in. So my job, to work in a person-centred way, is to honour your unique individuality and perspective, and to be concerned with your full inclusion. Now, for me, this is the absolute key about person-centred working. The point of person-centred working is not to deal with the thing that's wrong with the person. It's not about sorting the disability or curing the Alzheimer's. Those things are almost irrelevant. What is more important is the impact that these labels have had on people's day-to-day life. And because they carry these labels, they find themselves becoming increasingly marginalised and disconnected from their communities. You cannot provide all of the needs of a person with dementia without there being some connection in the community, because they are human beings who are more likely to want to experience being part of something. The community plays an absolutely vital role in this. So, a unique individuality and perspective, and are concerned with their full inclusion. Perspective is a really interesting thing. Quite often tell a story about what happened after my mother died, and I've got 3 sisters and a brother. And we all met together in my mother's home, and we're sorting through photographs and so on, and we're all telling the story as we understand it from these photographs. So I'm the oldest in the family. All my stories are about being really hard done to. You know, I had to look after the little ones. I had to take responsibility. You know. So yeah, I'm a wee bit like that, actually. I think I can be a pain in the neck to be around. You know. It's all really hard for me. That's how I told the stories. My youngest sister, so 4 girls, she's the youngest, she just never ever believed that my mother and father would be happy that they'd had yet another girl. She's always just apologetic about herself. Sorry, I'm here taking up this space. I know you would have preferred something different. That's Irene's perspective on life. My brother Frank, who was the youngest of us and the only boy, every photograph we had, Frank said, "Oh yeah, I remember that. It was really good. We had a really nice time. They were really nice people." And I think, yeah, Frank, that's right. Because from the moment you were born, the sun shone out of you. People loved you. You have walked through this world on a golden cloud. You know, and that's how he is. That's his perspective on life. So we're not just dealing with a person's situation. We're dealing with all that stuff that's come with them from wherever it is they've been, right? You begin to understand immediately the complexity of this. So being person-centred, now I think this is fundamental to anyone who's doing any kind of work with people at this time in our world and with our understanding of how social care needs to be provided. It's our minimum requirement. Okay. The second area that comes under this umbrella heading, or gets shoved in under this umbrella heading of person-centred approaches, is of person-centred planning is what I'm describing as a person-centred approach, which is a range of ways in which we can make our own practice more respectful of a person's choices and wishes. My husband has a disability, and so we get services coming into our house to get him up in the morning and help him get to bed at night, and they do various things for us around the house. When I first moved in, I was really distressed about how the washing was done. Right? I had some really difficult times around the washing. I would come home and the washing would be thrown out onto the line, and there would be a sleeve and the bottom end of a jumper, and tissues would have been washed in the washing, and if you knew me, right, and if you wanted to provide good support for me in a way that was respectful of my choices and wishes, here's what you would do. You would take the washing out of the machine, and as you took it out, you would shake it. You put it in order in the basket, put it in the order that you're going to hang it out in. And if you were doing a really good job, you would hang it out with the same colour of peg on each item. And then what you would do is, when you brought the washing in, you'd bring the pegs in too, because that's the job now. I found it practically impossible. I continue to find it impossible to get people who offer us support to do that task in the way that I ask them. I've gone to IKEA and I've bought hundreds of red pegs, right, so that we don't have the colour problem. But just the hanging of clothes out, I can't get it done. I've had huge rows with people. People have said to me, what's the committee in your head, Heather, that means that you've got to get all the pegs in off the line? And I'm thinking, there is no committee in my head. Well, there is, but we'll talk about that in a minute. But I thought that you were being paid to do a job, and that I could ask to have that job done in a way that made sense for me. Wrong. Okay. I can't make that happen. International blah, 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 blah. Right? Husband with a disability who's a city councillor, articulate, knows what he wants. We can't make that happen. What's happening here? We can't get people to work to alter their practice in a range of ways that are more respectful of our choices and wishes. I do not understand it. Well, I do actually. I've got some ideas about that somewhere down the line. So, if you want to work with me, you have to listen to me. But you can't just listen with your ears because it will go to your head too fast. If you listen slowly with your whole body, some of what I say may enter your heart. A woman with an intellectual disability called Christine Meyer wrote that. And what Christine Meyer is talking about is this understanding that the committee that's in my head, it actually comes from my upbringing. It comes from being brought up in the west of Scotland, in the industrial west. My first years of my life in a tenement building that had a communal wash house, right, where people hung their washing out on a line for everyone to see, where the highest praise that you could give a woman was to say that she hung out a lovely washing. Her nappies, they're spotless. Right? That's the committee in my head. When you think of some of the people that you serve, and what are the experiences that are making them who they are? Older women who've come with their husbands and their families, cleared plots of land, planted gardens, created orchards, worked, and they're confronted by people who won't swirl a mop around, or who won't stand and get that cobweb that's up in the top corner for them, or they wouldn't actually see them in their way if they were fit and able to do it. Unless you're providing support that's taking into account that stuff, you're not working in a person-centred way. And you know what? It doesn't take it any longer to hang the washing out like that than it does to sort of do this higgledy-piggledy thing. It really doesn't. I know people say that person-centred care is expensive, and it need not be, because if you're paying attention to this stuff, then that makes the difference to people. And that's not expensive stuff. Okay. And then we've got person-centred planning, which is the bit that everyone knows about, but actually is in some ways the least important part of it. Person-centred planning is a process of individual discovery and action that assists a person to live the life they want to live and to find their place in the community. So we've got this inclusion aspect again. finding your place in the community. A process of individual discovery and action. These answers are not just going to fall out of the sky for you. Part of your job is to figure it out with the person. If the person doesn't use words to speak, you've still got to figure out a way of making sense of what's going on for them in their life. If the person's forgotten lots of their life and has some trouble filling in the blanks, if the person's speech is beginning to deteriorate or their grasp on what is happening right now is slipping, then your job is to help them with that process of individual discovery. Your job is to discover it. You've got to work with the person who's in front of you. Requires you to be innovative, creative, but open to working in this way. To help people live the life that they want to live and find their place in the community. That's person-centred planning. Now, here is my contribution to the social care debate, the Simmons triangle. I reckon if Maslow can have his hierarchy, then I can have my triangle. I'm actually joking about that. That is a joke, okay? But I'm trying to understand the relationship between these ideas about values and practice, because being person-centred, it's about your values. It's about what you believe about the person who's in front of you, who you think you are in relation to them, how you understand them and their situation. That is the broad base of this triangle. It's the stuff that steadies everything up. Right? And then we have practice, because values are no good unless they actually find a way of coming out of your head and your heart into your hands. Your values have got to put a hat and coat on and show up in the room. What do they look like? If your organisation has good values, good thinking, and that's expressed in good practice, people will live well as a result of the way that you work with them. You will be working in a person-centred way. And then we've got this tiny little bit at the top, which is the planning, right? Which is about the time when there's change coming up for someone in their life. You don't use it all the time. You bring it out when something's happening that needs something to be done about. Maybe at the time of an initial diagnosis. I wouldn't say immediately, but when the person's had time to think about it and wants to start making the plans about what are the bits I'm going to leave, what am I going to change, what can I keep doing more of, what can I take up? A person-centred plan may well be really useful at that point. Now, there's an important idea that's around in planning, which is about a continuum of planning. The best place for planning is where a person is making all the decisions on their own and able to tell you exactly what they want. Don't you love assessment processes like that? When you walk in, you ask your questions, you get really clear answers, bingo, sorted. People are not always in that place though. Fantastic if we can be there. Best spot for planning. The worst spot for planning is where decisions are made by people according to their diagnosis. So because you have dementia, you'll go to this place. And so you have 25 people who all have dementia milling around in a space that's doing very little to encourage or model anything that's different than what's the confusion and sometimes the distress that they might feel. Okay. I think the next worst place to be planning from is from the place where the person with the say of the person with the highest rank in the room is what carries the decision. Whether that's the social worker or the manager of the care home or the consultant. That's not going to be a decision that's likely to reflect the individual needs of this person. It might reflect something about their expertise and what we do in general for people in that situation, but it's not going to be person-centred. Often the best place that we can make our planning from is from a place where we're relying on the best guesses and the informed choices of the people who know and love the person. So although person-centred planning and person-centred working is entirely about the individual, they are not on their own when they're doing it. I'm on my own, it's my decision, but I'm not by myself. I'm surrounded by people who know and love me. Maybe not surrounded in this day and age, maybe you've got to sort of work harder for that and build communities around about people. Maybe that's one of the first things that we need to do is create folks around about an individual. But you're doing this on your own, but not by yourself. Okay. I need to go a wee bit faster now, as always. So where does all of this come from? And this morning, I had a quick flick through Dawn's book, right, and it really scared me. It made me think I need to rip this up and start again. So I'm hoping that we're finding points of synergy and connection. Okay. Ideologically, person-centred planning comes from, and person-centred working comes from two big theories that have been around in disability: normalisation and social role valorisation. So Wolfensberger might be the name that you would have heard of. And in terms of its current design, O'Brien, Pierpoint, Forrest, Beth Mount, these are the people who led the designing process. I think there are some changes now. I think that there are some people who are working the area with varying degrees of effect. I think you would have to look at the work of Helen Sanderson and credit some of the stuff that she's done, but I also think that you'll need to sit really lightly on the idea of masses of templates and formulas and processes for doing some of this work. So that you bear that in mind. If it's an individual process, it's about getting to know an individual. It's unlikely that one standard form or template is going to gather you all the information that you need. So you can collect lots and lots of gorgeous paperwork that is absolutely meaningless from person to person. Okay? And so I think it has, because it comes from those roots, I think Dawn was saying that in what I read in her book was that the roots here for person-centred care are around the work that was done by Carol Rogers in the counselling area, and then with Tom, Right, you'll do that, Kitwood, right, okay, I just wanted you to know that I did know it, right, and forgot. So that work from Kitwood, right, okay, so there's a different feel, actually. And you know that thing about America and the thing they say about America and the UK, two nations divided by a common language. I think actually what we've got in social care are several sectors divided by a common language, because we think we're talking about the same thing, and actually we have either different meanings for it or certainly a different feel around it. Okay. And I'm really interested to explore some of that. I think some of the stuff we're doing in disability feels more robust. It's less fuzzy around the edges, less soft. It is about actively striving to shift power, give voice, create a good life. That's my feeling about it, and I'll be really interested to hear what you think. So I think that all of these things are great definitions, right? But I've got a huge question. I think that the definitions are fine, but what supports them are the values that we have about people, the stories that we tell ourselves about who people are and who we are in relation to them, how we choose to see people. I think that stuff's really crucial. I think that's the incredibly complicated. That's the part at which our best ideas and designs begin to fall apart, because not only are we working in a person-centred way, but we're also having to work with people who come themselves with their own perspectives and their own stories and their own reasons for doing this work. We need to look for and find meaning and purpose in people's lives and to act on that. I found this quote in a thing called the Golden Carers. Yeah, right? It troubled me, okay? Someone said, writing and saying, I created this game where 8 residents sit in a circle and I throw a balloon in the middle, and then we all count the number of times we can hit it in the air before it touches the ground. This is the thing that scares the bejesus out of people when they think about getting old and having to go into any sort of residential care or use some sort of day service. Are they going to sit me in a circle, throw a balloon in the centre, and then what? We're all going to bat it around? We've got to find things for people that have meaning and purpose in them and act on that. Wolfensberger, in his passing system, said values attributed to people according to who they are with and what they do, this idea of a valued social role. So you see the difference. I don't know if these pictures are going to be very clear. On one hand, we've got a group of people, older people, sitting outside playing chess, right? And they look like they're friends. Yeah. And then the other picture is a group of elderly women sitting playing, I don't know, some sort of board game. And I asked myself the question, which group would I like to be part of? And I think by and large, I'd like to be in the group that look like friends who are happening to have a game of chess. okay? Rather than the older ladies who look like they're playing some kind of children's game. Okay? So we add value according to how we see people and who we see them with. Okay? How quickly do we move from this, where people are valued and respected and treasured and loved, older members of their family, holders of wisdom and history and stories, to a situation where someone finds themselves alone, distressed, isolated? Now, I know, I mean, it's very difficult to get images that were respectful, but what happens in that space? How does that lady move from that situation to this? I think that we can say that there's illness and there's loss, but does that make all of it understandable? I don't think so. I think there's something about our values, about the value that we place on her and who she is and what her life might be worth at that time. That's how these things happen. Now, I'm just going to move on through a couple of slides now, and I want to finish up. Sorry, and this feels like a very abrupt ending, but I think my time is up. One of the great joys of my life has been to discover Michael Leunig since I've come to Australia. Okay, I want to read you something that Leunig has written and see if this might help you think about how to work in a person-centred way. It's from a book called The Curly Pajama Letters. Two friends writing to one another, a man called Mr. Curly, who lives in a place called Curly Flats, and he's writing to his young friend, Vasco Pajama, prize-winning name, okay, who's travelling the world. Okay. So he says, "Dear Vasco, the rose plants have just this day been made available at the Curly Flat Rose Farm. As usual, a small ensemble from the Academy of Ancient Music performed a selection of old airs and dances in celebration. I purchased 2 roses from my collection, Baby's Bottom and Grandmother's Kiss. Like all roses from the farm, the origins of these 2 plants are unknown. They are old mystery roses, and of course the ensemble only played old music of unknown authorship, probably composed by birds in the dawn of history. Baby's Bottom, as you might imagine, has a plump, rounded flower with pink petals of the most delicate texture and colour. The perfume is delightfully reminiscent of a baby's breath. Grandmother's Kiss has a large, blousy, crinkled flower with an abundance of big, loose petals of deep crimson. It has a distinct handbag aroma, which comes in great volumes and alters markedly as the day progresses. The evening aroma is quite different to the aroma of the morning. How arresting is the credential unknown origin, how deep and rich it seems, how vibrant and free and magical, like a talisman, seems that creature, that plant, or that thing of unknown origin. Enjoy the Sea of Madness, Vasco. It is the wildest of the 7 seas, certainly, but the most wondrous sailing can be had there. Above you is the sky of gladness, also full of ancient music, and baby's breath, and birds, and the perfume of roses. Good health to you. Yours faithfully, Mr. Curly." For me, person-centred working, person-centred approach to anything, person-centred approach to assessment, to service delivery, whatever, exists in this space of mystery roses and unknown origin. What you have in front of you is a person that you don't know yet, a person whose life may be complicated somewhat, or whose knowing might become complicated by some of their condition. And the task of anyone who wants to work effectively with them is to journey along that mysterious path, to see it as a journey of mystery and understanding and unfolding, rather than something that has a conclusion and an inevitable outcome and a series of stops along the way that everyone will experience. Person-centred working is essentially about reframing the situation so that you see a person and not a problem, so that you see a mystery, right? And so that you can become engaged in a relationship with that person and walk the road together. So I look forward to hearing more about what person-centred might come to mean in dementia care as you sort of explore the depths of it. I'd love to be part of it. Thank you very much for listening to me today ramble, and I appreciate your time. Thank you.